I think we're ready to get started up again if you want to have a seat. This is for our last couple of sessions, our first day almost done, almost time to go to our fantastic evening event. If you're anything like me, you spent most of the break on social media, tweeting, posting to Facebook, answering some messages. So we thought that probably the best thing to do after that break, which you've probably filled with a bunch of social media, is to talk about some social media. So this next panel, we're going to talk about some best practices, creating, maintaining an effective social presence for your organization. The panel is going to take us through some of the different approaches between B2B and B2C. And of course, we're going to dig into some of the different strategies depending on the network that you're looking at. So here to take us through this are Matt Higgins, SVP Digital and Innovation at Makovsky, and Bryan Pederson, SVP Partner Digital Practice Lead at Fleischman. Gentlemen.
Matt and Bryan, thank you so much for joining. All right, so again, ground rules. Push back as much as you want, ask questions as much as you want, ask each other questions. We don't want this to be didactic. Don't answer the question the way I ask you the question. And anytime you get to push back on Apollo, it is a plus because he can handle it.
I appreciate it.
He can handle it.
We'll do our best to make you regret that.
All right, so we've been talking about social, right? And everything we've been doing, we've been streaming, right? Onto Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, into our own environments. We keep on talking to clients. We talk it every single day. Part of the key of press releases is you send a press release out. Ideally, it's going to get picked up. People are going to blog about it and tweet about it, everything that goes along with it. When I say social to you guys, starting with you, Bryan, what does it mean? Like, what's the first thing you think?
I think really it's come back to what it originally meant, which is to build relationships with people. And I think for a long time it kind of went into this place where big advertisers came in and they started to focus on putting high quality produced content into those channels the same way that you would put on TV, into print. But now we're starting to see that we're able to create those connections, whether it's B2B, B2C, right, and start to really have a dialogue. And we're seeing how consumers rally, how they become advocates, how you can turn them into spokespeople. Influencers is a huge space where we're seeing so much growth, but it has started to bring it back to that original intention, I think.
Matt?
Yeah, I think Bryan answered that pretty well, but just adding in there, I think social is where people go to have authentic conversations with each other, with brands, and I think they're always going to go to that place where they can reach people that they may not be able to reach in real life, or they may be able to find information, and authentic information, real information, engaging stories that they're not finding on the channels that they're being served at the moment. So that's why we always see new channels show up or new micro channels show up. People are always going to go where that most authentic conversation takes place.
Apollo?
I agree with all of that. The only thing I'll add is that it's giving a voice to a community that otherwise didn't have one. So it's no longer a one-directional means of communication where you blast out and people just get what they get. It's that opportunity for them to dictate to you where and how they want to consume the information, and they are now the gatekeepers of social. So I think to some extent, it's a takeover of the process.
And once you open up the floodgates, you got to continue feeding it, right? You can't just do it and stop.
Well, to answer that just very quick, I don't think you have control over opening the floodgates. The flood is there. Whether you choose to swim or not is the choice that you have.
Right. So either one of you answer this first. How often does a client come to you guys and go, okay, we want to create a social presence, and you look at them, they have like 8 followers on Twitter, they probably don't even have a corporate Facebook account. Like, what's the first thing you say to them, and how do you get me prepped that, okay, as I'm going to take you down this journey, this is what you have to think about?
Yeah, if I can jump in. I think it's about what, I would kind of push back and say, well, what's your business objective?
Right. If I said, I just want lots of followers.
Yeah, and I would say,
get lost?
I would, my job.
Buy some tweet followers, right?
My job with my clients is to be their strategic counsel. It's not to do what they're asking me to do. They can do that in-house if they want. My job, when they come to me with a request like that, is to delicately and professionally push back and say, what's your real aim here? Are you trying to gain influence? Are you trying to drive conversions or sales? Are you trying to build a following somewhere or build the brand? That would be my question back to them. And then once I know who they're trying to reach and what they're trying to get them to do or feel, that's when I can come back to them and say, here's the right move. Here's the right channel that you should be focused on.
Is that a normal use case, what I just said to you? Or
Absolutely,
okay.
yes. Yeah, the first conversation is typically, I want to grow followers on Instagram, but why do you want to grow followers on Instagram? Is that your audience? Is that where they live? Is that where they consume their stories now?
Bryan, same thing, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely the same. And I think what we do is the same thing that Matt is talking about. We ask them what are their objectives, and we also, we ask them how serious they are, right, to get into that space. What is it that they really want to achieve, and are they willing to bring together all the data, all of the stake owners to do something well? Because you see that where they have 4 or 5 followers, they have 10 on Twitter, and then they want to go and say, what can we do in all these places? And you can say, well, what do you want to achieve, and how do we start to prioritize those channels? And even if it means shutting down some so you can really own another one, that's really what they're going to do to win. And you want to be able to say, I want to achieve something at the end of the day with those channels.
And then you have to say to these guys, well, by the way, this is now a 24/7 channel, right? You can't just turn it on and turn it off.
Right.
Are they ready for that?
I think they need to ask that question before they get started, and I think Bryan makes a really good point. You don't need to be on every channel. You need to be on the right channels, and particularly depending on how large your team is and what your internal capabilities are, it's about prioritizing the channels that matter most and really spending the resources, particularly when you're talking about a 24/7,
right,
always-on approach. Feeding the beast can be enough as it is, but if you're just feeding the beast or feeding content for content's sake, you're not really doing anything.
So does this happen much? So I'm actually just thinking, so someone comes to you, they follow your guys' guidance, they build their followers, but they never try to aggregate the data, right? I mean, or someone comes to you who has a lot of followers already, and they're like, hey, it's not moving the needle, because how important is them to look into the social and what they're getting at, or monitor what's happening from it? Does it make any sense what I just asked?
So you're asking the importance of monitoring success?
Yeah, it's like, why do it if you're not going to get real data back? It's not just about having 100,000 followers or 5 million followers. It's about, is it moving your product? Is it moving your image? Like, what is it doing?
Yeah, and I think that gets back to the objective-first approach that Bryan and I were mentioning. We're moving away from looking at just vanity metrics like likes or follows. They're still important. It's still a great way to showcase success on a social channel. But going back again to what's your business objective and how does social fit into that? Sometimes it's just about gaining a following on an email campaign and using that as your currency. In other ways, it's more about driving a conversion or driving people down the funnel. We're able to have and look at more data to gather insight, but it's really important when you're building out that business objective for social, understanding what are the main points of success. And what does that look like? Because if you try to look at every data point,
right,
again, you're just going to be lost in data with no real insight.
Data for data's sake makes no sense, right?
Yeah, and I think what it really, what's interesting is what we're seeing is this trend of data portability across different platforms. And I think what's really interesting is, you can argue, for example, that someone looks at a social post and they do 3 things, right? They click on it because it's relevant. Yep. They ignore it because it's not, right, or then they go and Google it.
Right.
And then they find as much information as they possibly can about that product or service, and then they might make a purchase decision or a conversion. And that's when you have to have a strong investment into the data, because then you can start to run analysis where you can say, analyze all of my search traffic, all of the search data through Google, see what kind of website traffic is potentially coming down through Google, and try and attribute that back to some of the social content that you're putting out based on when you're publishing and the time of day. And it's not an easy thing to draw a connection to, but that's where you have to have a strong investment into data and into data portability across the different platforms.
I agree. Apollo?
There's a common question that I find in certain sectors it comes up more than others, where organizations are trying to make a decision whether to engage or not in social.
Right.
And how this ties into the data piece is where I found many communications chiefs struggling is sometimes you need to make the decision not to engage in a particular channel. It's not always should I do social or not. Sometimes it's which channel should I engage with. And where they struggle is how can I make a data-driven decision not to engage or not to use this channel in some way, so that if an issue or at some point does come up and they're challenged, or even the compliance department sometimes is asking, what are we doing on social? There is an informed decision that can be justified back to the organization. And if there's no commitment to the data from the get-go, it's really hard to justify that to a board, to an executive committee, to the compliance council, that you chose not to do social because we didn't like it, we didn't know it. But when you have data, we found you can now back up the decision not to do it, or the decision to do it in whatever channels you've chosen to use.
Great. And you want to comment on that at all? Or you want to move on? All right, we're going to move on since you didn't jump on for comment. So how important is it to respond to, when you're doing social, the audience who responds, or if it's Twitter tweets about what you write, or if it's Instagram and then I write a comment afterwards, how important is it, do you tell customers, respond to your audience?
I'll go first. Yeah, I think I think again it's important to understand the type of audience and the purpose of the social channel. So it's not always wise to feed the trolls, and I think that was mentioned a little bit on the AP side in the last panel. So you don't have to respond to everyone if it's not relevant or if it's not going to help the conversation that you're trying to have. That being said, both internally and with agency partners, it's important to have rules of the road and how you respond,
right,
and what you can respond to, and have that all set up and predetermined beforehand. And having those rules of the road, it really empowers your team to be able to respond much faster, as opposed to trying to go through 3 layers of approval just to respond to one reply or one comment.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I would always push clients to kind of over respond and up the cadence of everything when it comes to responses, when it comes to posts.
Yeah.
You see a lot of brands, they'll say that they'll answer every 6 hours, but I mean, if you're in an airport and you're tweeting at Delta and they don't respond to you, I mean, you're going to be really, really upset.
Right.
And I feel like
Sounds personal.
a lot of the brands, actually they were great. They responded in like a minute, but it was, I just feel like the brands, even what we said before about the idea of overproduced, and I think that they get stuck so much in trying to make things perfect when people don't expect things to be perfect on social, and they would rather have that relationship and that responsiveness over perfection.
Other people, because if you write on something that someone else is doing, and you take 10 people and you do that every single day, chances are 2 or 3 of them are going to respond, and when they respond, they're going to start following you too.
Right.
And you're building a relationship. It is probably one of the most intimate relationships a consumer or a buyer can have with a brand also.
Yeah, it's your chance to have a real, honest conversation with someone, and it allows you to personify your brand in a way that wasn't possible before social media.
So how do you, so go to you, Bryan. How do you advise a client? All right, so we've decided which social channel we're going to emphasize on, and we talked on one of the other panels about coming up with your calendar. Do you sit and go, okay, let's plan this out for the next 12 months, what we're going to do? Because, again, you got to create more content. It is 24/7. You just can't just do a tweet, or you just can't do, a picture for Instagram. Do you have to have campaigns planned? I mean, what's the advice?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of do it in almost 3 layers where, there's the macro trends, right?
Yep.
You know what those are. It's
Yep.
things like holidays, or there's NFL season starting right now, or in the middle. And then you can plan for those things. But then you want to have a layer where it's all about the moments, right? Because all these things just pop up. For example, with NFL, no one could predict that Nike was going to sign Kaepernick, make him the face. It drove tremendous conversation. So we need to have a team that's also ready to respond to that. And then you have that layer of daily below that, where it's just every day, always on, responding like you mentioned before. And I think that if you have that multi-tier strategy, it's going to set you up so that you feel like you're authentic and in the moment, not overly planned.
When you saw the Kaepernick, did you sit there and go, damn, what a great idea? They were so, because they planned it. They did all the research. They knew who wasn't going to like it. They knew who bought their shoes, who didn't buy their shoes. Did you say, brilliant? What was your first thought?
I wish that we were the agency.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone in this room was the target audience for that campaign. They don't care what we think about the Kaepernick campaign. They care about what a 12-year-old in Detroit cares about the Kaepernick campaign, because that's the audience they're going after there. And again, it goes back to objective and knowing your audience, and then starting from there.
So when you sit down, so Matt, on your side, when you sit down, do you come up with here's our calendar we're going to do again?
Yeah.
For July 4th, here's an idea, but you can't skip, right?
No. So again, you need to be human, and the way that we sometimes look at this and help explain is you have bonfires and fireworks. So the bonfires are always on all the time. That's how you're feeding the beast. You're planning ahead. And then fireworks are those big marquee moments where you can jump into a conversation. By planning ahead for the moments that you know are going to come, both on your business story and in what your consumer cares about, that allows your team to focus on the moments where they can jump into a conversation in an authentic way. A quick example, Reebok was a former client of mine, and we planned out the calendars, and something happened in politics where they're a women's first brand, they want to have authentic conversations with a female audience. Something happened in politics, they're able to jump in quickly and have a conversation that goes viral and allows them to reach thousands, if not millions, of women that they're trying to target in an authentic way. It's because they planned ahead and they had the calendar built out. It allowed their team to jump in on the moments that mattered.
Anything you want to add?
I love this whole concept of planned spontaneity because it does work. The point is so valid in that if you are not prepared, then when the opportunity comes up and these waves come, when they come and usually you have no notice, then your opportunity, the window is so tight in order to jump on that wave that you can't try and build a social media strategy and a playbook when the wave is cresting.
Right.
It's too late, you've missed it. So it really goes back to the original goal of what are we trying to do?
Right.
And then making sure that you have some form of playbook that guides and informs, even down to the level of who are the people that need to be in the room to approve the post to go out, and making sure that they know the process and know your calendar so that they can support you and jump on it.
Right.
I agree, and I think that, the other thing that it's really important for is when things go really bad too.
Right.
So one of the clients that we had last year was Tide. If you guys remember the Tide Pod Challenge, when everyone was eating the Tide Pods, and it was a massive PR nightmare, right, for P&G, who owns Tide. And what we did was we quickly kind of jumped in. We looked at the analysis. We signed Gronk, who is tight end for the Patriots, and he did this great video, and we were able to get that out all in the matter of a week and really turn that around quickly and have him insert into the conversation and then really swing it back in the direction that they wanted to. But it felt authentic because if Tide had just come out and just, put up this PSA that said, don't eat Tide Pod, literally the teenagers would eat twice as much if they did that.
Right.
And it's how do you do it in a way that jumps into the conversation and then still maintain the authenticity?
And also find a spokesperson that resonates to that audience.
Exactly.
Which is one of the keys. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, just adding in, and on the quick response side, again, it's about having your team empowered to be able to make decisions. So you're not going through 7 rounds of approval before something goes out. Your audience is going to see that it's watered down, it's not authentic. It's really important that you have those rules of the road set up beforehand.
Okay. So if I wanted to do a social campaign and I wanted to reach consumers 50 plus, what avenue do you go?
Facebook.
Yeah.
Our parents are all on Facebook.
Yeah. They absolutely on Facebook to start, and then maybe looking into some paid search after that.
18 to 25?
That's where it gets a bit more fragmented. I think the easy answer is Instagram and Snapchat, but I think you start looking into some of the micro communities. I mentioned backstage a place like Reddit.
Yep.
Scariest place on the internet, but also a great place to find a self-selected community. Mm-hmm. If you're selling Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle T-shirts, you can bet your bottom dollar that there's going to be one, if not more than that, subreddits of people who love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Place ads there. Join that community there. That's just another example.
All right, harder campaign to do. I'm going for a B2B audience or a B2C audience. Who do you prefer to walk in?
The client?
Yeah, client. I'm the client. I'm going to come in, whatever it is, and I go to you. I want to reach a B2B audience, right? Or I walk in and go, I'm going after a B2C audience. Which one do you prefer?
Oh, which
one's easier?
Can we pull the audience first?
Yeah, you can pull the audience.
Who's B2C?
Yeah.
Okay, don't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
Yeah.
So.
What do you prefer? What's an easier campaign, and what's the nuances between the two?
Yeah, I think the gut will tell you that B2C is easier because there's more room to play with the storytelling and being creative.
Right.
That being said, if you're a B2B brand, you probably have a lot less competition. If you do a really excellent campaign that is engaging and interesting, you're going to be able to cut through the noise a lot easier than a consumer brand that has thousands of competitors, especially with direct-to-consumer rising. If you're a B2B brand and everyone else around you is just kind of doing the same old and just kind of feeding the beast. If you can be really creative and innovative on the social side and more largely on content and marketing side on the B2B area, that's really where you can have a lot of success if your competitors aren't quite doing anything there yet. So.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with it. I feel like it comes down to a question of how serious, B2C can be easier, but how serious are they about investing into it, right? Because the problem with B2C is that there's so many things that influence. If you have a mass product out there, like a Tide, for example, it's being sold everywhere. There's billboards, there's commercial, there's print. And you have to have an organization that's going to say, we will isolate this market. We will not let all the other marketing things that we're doing into that market, and we will measure their sales, and not just be about likes and impressions. You know, when it comes to B2B, what's kind of, even though it's a lot more nuanced, it can be a lot easier to show return on investment because you can be so targeted in terms of finding, you know, if it's healthcare, finding those doctors, those HCPs, targeting them on LinkedIn, converting them right away with some of the lead gen tools that you have on LinkedIn, and you can be a lot more isolated and have that data. So I think it comes down to how are they willing to measure success?
Yeah, and if you're selling a product on the B2B side, it's fairly easy to show success in every level of the funnel there, and show how you're kind of fueling your sales team and driving leads. On the B2C side, like you said, you know, if someone's shopping at a store, you don't know if it was affected by social or by out of home or another channel.
Yeah.
Can you do a B2B campaign and not involve LinkedIn? Or should you involve LinkedIn? Let me not say you.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. We were talking very recently. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about all my clients, but Client X. So I mean, they're a big contact lens creator, right? And there's probably like 2 in the world.
Yeah.
But anyway, they were like, do we launch on Instagram, right? And I think the answer is yes, because we did a lot of analysis for them to look at. I mean, the reality is optometrists are on LinkedIn, but they're also obviously looking at Instagram every day. And Instagram is the place where you go for beautiful photography, right? So there's a natural segue for creating better vision. And we can still target those people and we can still talk to them. And that's the beauty of what we said before. You're creating relationships. People don't just go to work and then only go to work platforms. They can go to these other places. And it's okay to have that kind of surround sound.
Absolutely.
But when you're, all right, so before you answer, so when you're dealing with clients, obviously we're working on a lot of paid, right? And so, but you also talk to them that you need to also at the same time be really working on your earned media too?
Yeah, I think it's about creating the connected ecosystem. So not thinking about all these different channels as, you know, as different teams or different tactics. They're all working hand in hand, whether it be you know, search or paid or some of the earned stuff too. And I think in the last panel they had mentioned if SEO is still a thing. Yeah, it absolutely is. And if you can take a press release and put that out there and then break that across social into 15 different posts, also put it on your own channels, that's how you can really start to own search. And that's before we even start talking about voice, which some people might think, and I sometimes say is the future of SEO. But instead of going on...
For anyone who doesn't know, what does that mean?
I mean your Amazon Alexa or your Google Home. And instead of wanting to be on page 1, you're going to have to be the first voice result to kind of own search when it comes to the voice. Yeah, exactly.
So you believe that's where it's all going, right? If you were going to bet? Or
I kind of agree. I mean, it's going in that direction. The problem is it almost starts to preclude marketing altogether because, I mean, literally you say to Alexa, send me the best, in a year from now, send me the best shoes for me, or send me the best cologne, perfume, send me the best shampoo. They're only going to send you one result.
Sure.
And it's not, you're not going to be able to buy your, it's probably the Amazon brand, that's right. But yeah, I mean, you can't buy your way there, so it becomes a question of social content, all those things that will inform, that are personalized. Having all this content that says this is great for someone that has, thin, dark hair, it's going to be the right one for you.
My wife thinks I have an inappropriate relationship with Alexa already, so it's only going to get worse. You want to add anything?
Yeah, we won't talk about your Alexa relationships, but the only thing I wanted to add there was just the nuance, really. And I think it's fascinating that really the example Bryan and Matt are referencing absolutely hold true. If you're telling me is a B2B campaign and there's a B2C campaign, when we're involved in these kinds of discussions with our clients, it can be very, very difficult for us to know how we can help if you don't know what you're trying to do. But what I have found is if you've got a very well buttoned up digital strategy already, where there is a B2B company that has a solid blog, is already creating content and using their website very well, so their own channels are being deployed, has good journalist relationships, does a really good job of telling their story, not talking about the product, but actually crafting that narrative of the what, the whys, and the how they help their customers. And then you have a B2C company that does nothing but put up advert on a billboard. I'd much rather work in that B2B scenario and just help them perform the next step. So the circumstance will really dictate the behavior, but I think your measurement point was absolutely accurate. There's an opportunity in B2B for first mover advantage. It still exists in many B2B avenues where a small effort can actually give you a substantial return because the competition group is so low.
Right. Any questions so far? Pretty honest? Okay, your question over here? No. Just waving. Nice to see you. Thank you. All right, so ROI. I mean, everyone's going to ask ROI at the end of the day. We spend X, we get Y out of it. I mean, how do you manage expectations for the client on ROI?
Yeah, so this question should be, as a CMO or head of social or head of marketing, how do I keep my job? That should be the other way to rephrase the question, I think. But I think again, it's about at the very beginning of the campaign or about the program that you're developing, having an understanding of what success looks like and having buy-in across the entire organization, and then making sure everyone's speaking the same language when how you measure that success. If we're strictly thinking about the B2B side, you tie it right into the funnel strategy. So top of funnel, it's about growing awareness and building the amount of people that you're engaging with, bringing in new leads. Middle, you're retargeting and you're trying to collect as many emails as possible. That should be your currency. And then finally, in the bottom of the funnel, attributing to what you're doing on social to actually driving sales. And on the B2B side, I think it's quite easy to measure ROI. It's not extremely easy, but with the right tools, you can definitely measure success and showcase that across the organization.
Bryan?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think it's kind of what we were saying about the measurement, the funnel, the data portability, and I think that one of the things that organizations sometimes miss also is how do you measure and value all the other incremental things that are coming with that, right? So it's obviously you're going to drive to the point of purchase and the sale and the conversion, but for example, with influencers, right? Those guys become a content factory in many cases. You sign those influencers to go and promote your product, but then you have that content in perpetuity, and you could feed an entire Instagram calendar of your own with that content and send it out to LinkedIn. So there's so much that's expensive content to go and create. Same thing with social. I mean, if we're answering all these questions like we were saying, like Delta does on their Twitter feed, how much money are they saving from a call center perspective, and how do you start to assign a monetary value to those things? So then when you're talking about social, it becomes more than just that drive to ROI, which is super important, but all the incremental value that you're driving outside of it.
All right, since you touched on influencers, I mean, is it part of the tactic when you're talking to clients going, okay, besides your having internal influencers, we should engage with external influencers when it's more of a B2C program, or I guess even for a B2B?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not the answer. It's just one of a number of tactics that you can use to reach your audience in an authentic way. Is it
less impactful now than it was like 2 years ago? Because people are sort of immune to it, or no?
No, I think that's just a general trend. Whenever a new tactic or a new channel comes out, it's the media darling to start, and then you get the next round of coverage where everyone's hating on it. I think it's just about having a clear understanding of how you can use it. And I think it's really about doing some of the legwork and rolling up your sleeves and finding the right influencers to reach your audience in the right way and tell the right message.
And is it about how many followers they have? Is there a magic number in followers that makes a difference, or is it really what they're messaging or how they're viewed?
It's a marketing, it's a mix, just like any other ad buy that you would make. It's quality and quantity. So you want to reach the right people. You don't want to just reach a lot of people. So I think you have to kind of find that balance and tiering the micro influencers and the larger influencers. Obviously, the price changes based off of who you're working with. So I think you have to look at your budget and be smart with who you're working with, and make sure it's authentic too. You wouldn't want to work with an influencer who's working with you on Monday and then your competitor on Wednesday. You see that a lot on the consumer side. where you have influencers that are wearing Nike, and then the next week you see them wearing Adidas and saying how much they love Adidas. So I think it's really important to find the right influencers and then try to spam that out as much as you can.
Apollo, your thoughts on influencers?
And I think in the B2B space, it's even more important to
Yeah.
make sure you are taking that extra step to have a good alignment. Remember, it is a relationship at the end of the day. You are not getting an influencer in order to hijack their social channels. And this was mentioned earlier. It's really about how can you help them understand your story, your messaging, your organizational goals, and then have your influencer communities using their language so they are congruent, communicate that out to the masses. Granted, you're going to help them along the way, but think of it as to use the words from earlier, a partnership. It's not a takeover of any forms, but it absolutely does matter, will matter, and is it going to increase mattering?
Good answer.
I made a word there.
I like it. So for PR practitioners in the audience and watching virtually, what kind of advice do you give them as they're thinking, as they're venturing into, they haven't been offering this much to their customers before and they are now? What advice do you give them?
I would say for PR, definitely a focus on sales and a focus on data and an investment in data, because I think the challenge with PR is that they've so traditionally been about non-measurable results or just kind of reporting these giant impression numbers. They add up kind of like the circulation of all the magazines and the viewership, and that's
Right.
kind of the number, right? And you get 1 billion impressions, but what does that mean? And I think that PR agencies now, they're getting much smarter about understanding that they have to invest in that data and that measurement because they're being held to the same standard by the same marketing decision maker over on the client side. But I also think that it opens so many doors because all we see every day is the fact that people don't trust advertising anymore. The days of being able to walk into a subway car, for example, and they buy up all the ads, right? Or they take over all the commercials during a show. People are skipping them, they're tuning it out, they're not paying attention to those things. And what we can do if we have the data, we are coordinated in PR, is we can go into a city, we can go into a market, and we could coordinate having all of these people talking about it, all the influencers, all the earned media, all of it working together so that someone feels like, why is everyone talking about this product or this service? Right. It's amazing. And they see it, and they're not going to just listen to one person, but they're going to see it everywhere. And you can create that now, but it takes data, it takes coordination, it takes orchestration, and that's what PR firms have to be better at these days.
Yeah. And I think as things have fragmented over time, as a PR professional, you need to change the way you think about your own job. There's a crossover with communications and marketing that's taking place. So don't just kind of swim in the same lane that you always have. Look into social, look into some of the digital, make sure that it's connected with everything that you're doing.
When you guys are talking to clients, does the topic ever come up of, social with Yelp and reviews? How important is that? Because you mentioned before, we all second guess when we see an ad, right? What's true, what's not true. But user-generated, customer-generated response, is that huge, or is it tapped, or is it untapped?
It's massive, and honestly, people don't even realize. I would say the average consumer doesn't even realize how many of those Amazon reviews are bought. I mean, there's hundreds. You can just go to a company and just buy 100 reviews overnight. So consumers will start to realize that this is happening more and more, and it's a system. There's a whole world out there that just caters to ratings and reviews, and I think that what it's going to start to evolve into, and as the AI gets better, and as we're talking about things like Alexa, the platforms that start to feed that information, they're going to get better about feeding relevant and contextual information to those consumers. And it's not going to be, literally everything has like 3.5 or 4 stars, right? Because it kind of coalesces around the bell curve, and it's just...
But it goes in everything. Like my wife won't go to a doctor unless she checks out the reviews. Restaurants, hotels, airlines. It goes on cars. It goes on to almost every purchase.
But when you have 50 results that all have 4 stars, which one do you pick?
Right.
And that's the challenge.
And there was that Times article about people purchasing YouTube followers and Twitter followers. But that goes in the same line as like you said, UGC or customer stories, or even influencers. It's all about someone else telling you that this company is good to work with or this product works. And you need that authentication because we don't trust ads. We don't trust just one tweet from a brand.
No, I think the key is what the population really wants to see is they like the ADA. Like when I was a kid, the ADA, American Dental Association, on toothpaste, they never said Crest was better than Colgate. They just said, hey man, if you use either one of these two toothpaste, your teeth aren't going to fall out, and it has the right stuff in it. And that was like enough.
Right.
Now there's nowhere you go where you don't know, was the guy paying to say that? Was it real or was it not? Where do you find that honest recommendation?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where we were talking about this whole tiers, having all of these different things working in coordination. So you have the ratings and reviews, you have the influencers, you have the earned media saying this is a good product, and having that all kind of take over the conversation.
Yeah, our job as marketers and as communicators is to break down the complexities of our business and inform our customer and inform both future customers and current customers to make the best decision possible. So no matter the medium, no matter the story, that's our goal at its core, and that's what we need to be thinking about when we're building out these strategies.
So press release, traditional press releases, or like we've been talking about, adding media. How important is it on a campaign when you're talking to clients?
Press release?
A pure, unadulterated, message press, product launch, whatever it is.
I was at, I think the PR Week Awards 2 weeks ago,
Okay.
and they had a grand prize for press release of the year. And I didn't know what qualified the press release of the year.
What won? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I don't know what made it the press release. Yeah, I mean, it's still important. It's still important, but I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to relationships, and I mean, that's kind of what the business is now. Media teams have actually gotten smaller at PR agencies, where now it's more about being targeted and being, very focused on just building relationships versus press releases, I think.
Yeah, and we everything is ephemeral now, so it's the tip of the spear. If your tactic is, let's write a press release and push it out, that's not enough. You need to have that connected ecosystem. So the language in your press release needs to become a white paper. That white paper needs to become 6 different infographics. Those 6 different infographics need to become 40 social cards. It's just part of this entire ecosystem that you're building out together to tell your story and connect with your audience.
Yeah, especially so, smaller organizations especially more so. Budgets are limited, need to be very, very strategic and selective about where you will put your budget. And that's where that long tail effort can really make a huge difference. This spray and pray, it's not the way to get the kind of results that will make a difference. So press releases are an important component, but just part of the mix. That alone won't do the job for you.
All right, how important is in anyone's mix in social adding video?
I think depending on the brand, depending on your audience, extremely important. Think about the way that you all interact with your social channels. You're typically probably watching video at work or even watching video right now on mute. And that's just the way people consume information now. It allows video and visuals, infographics. They allow you to break down the complexity of what you're trying to sell or what story you're trying to tell. It allows you to break down that complexity in a really engaging, informative way. That instead of me reading a 40-page white paper, I can watch a 30-second video and get everything that you want me to get. And I think that's where the importance of video comes. It's breaking down that complexity and helping you understand something that might take a lot of time to understand or might be difficult to understand.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing a trend with just technology catching up to it, where we can produce video at a rate that is so cheap and so fast.
Right.
Even I know we had someone from AP up here, but even the news organizations themselves are now using these software platforms that it costs them. They can make a video that goes onto social that's a 30-second, 2-minute video with all of the captions like you were talking about.
Yep.
I mean, they can produce those things in like 15 minutes now, and they do it with AI. They use technology, and it's starting to spread outside the newsrooms and into companies now where they're able to do this at that scale.
And the expectation is lower than you think.
Yep.
We're mostly watching videos and news on our phones or on our tablets. I don't need something that can be put out into a movie theater. I just need something that I can watch on my phone that does the job. And I think we need to be less careful about the type of video we put out and just start putting out as much video as possible. And again, breaking down those longer form videos as much as you can to get that economy of scale and put out as much as you possibly can.
Right.
How important is user-generated video, allowing the audience to respond with video and social for your clients?
I would say it hasn't been as strong of a strategy, and the reason is just because of the challenges with, you get a lot of shaky video, you get a lot of even when you turn on the news and you see the things blurred out on the side because the guy was holding like this. So that's been a challenge. The contrast in the dark.
Everyone
but I think it's going to get better. And I think what we were saying before around technology and the idea that consumers are having more and more powerful tools, and those things will allow them to start to create more higher quality at a very easy rate.
Yeah, yeah. I think it ties back to what we're talking about with review and validating a company or product. I think UGC kind of plays into that space too. And again, like you said, a lot of folks are still holding their video in portrait mode instead of landscape mode. But that's just a problem that you have to face. On the consumer side, typically it's about educating the consumers to make sure that they're sending videos in a way that you want them to. And you need to take that extra step to help explain in any kind of program that you're running.
So I do a weekly video to the global staff, and I always ask members of the team to send videos. And the first thing we say in every single line is, hold your camera sideways, right? Hold your phone sideways. 75% of all videos I get are still held this way. And we have to put weight on that side.
Guilty. I've done it. Yep. I'm one of the contributors. I now turn the phone sideways.
Nicole, who's back there, does the same thing. Every video I get from her is this way.
I now turn the phone sideways, admittedly. The one area of just intrigue, there are a couple of companies I've been speaking with that are just thinking about how they can use user-generated video to capture product feedback in some way. And I just thought, what an interesting concept for that. Think of a concept where someone buys a product and they can't figure out how to put it together, or something isn't working in some way. And the user being able to show someone what they're doing, if they're doing it incorrectly, allowing someone to correct them or guide them on either where they might be going wrong, or to acknowledge that, yes, that genuinely is a fault, it shouldn't be doing that or working or operating in that way. That's just a particularly interesting avenue I've seen for...
Are you more likely to trust a video review on something or a text review?
Me personally, someone went through the effort to produce a video review of something. I'm more willing to believe that it's an authentic acquisition of the product than the quick 5 stars and it's okay in the comments.
Right.
Great.
Right. Your guys' thoughts on what Apollo was saying?
No, I think it's a good point. I agree.
Okay. Anything you want to tell the audience before we wrap this up? One piece of advice, one little nugget that you...
I think I hit on this a bit, but really, we're looked at as cost centers. So figure out a way that you can scale out what you're doing in terms of content creation. So again, when you develop a white paper, it's not just a white paper. When you develop a 5-minute corporate video, it's not just a 5-minute corporate video. How can you take that white paper and create 3 months worth of social content from it, and have a continued conversation around that subject matter? That's really what I've been trying to impress on my clients lately, and I think that would be the big takeaway that I would give to all of you is start thinking about how you can socialize the longer form pieces that you're putting out there, to feed the beast and fuel your channels, but then also to get a little bit more out of the investment that you made in creating that piece.
Great.
Yeah, I would say my advice would be just elevate the conversation beyond just social, because I think that it gets stuck in just this social place. And what we see every day, right, anecdotally, is we see, for example, P&G for years was all about the biggest mass advertiser in the world. Yeah. And during that time, you saw all these brands like Dollar Shave Club that didn't run a single commercial, and they were entirely a social-based brand. You saw Honest Company come up and kill Pampers. You see all these upstart shampoos that are taking out Head and Shoulders every day, and they're not running marketing campaigns. They're only existing on social. So anecdotally, we know that is a success route. When you get into the metrics, there's a lot of different silos you have to break down, but keep pushing that this is the future of marketing. This is how brands literally grow today versus just trying to make a social media argument.
All right, let's go back. So if I sat here with you guys in 5 years from now, what do you think you'd be saying?
Wow. That's a really tough one.
Take your time, but not 5 years to come up with your
I think that we will be at a place where it's going to be, advertising is going to be significantly less impactful even than it is today. And I think that what we'll think is that we made the investment, we convinced, we put in place the data to validate those pieces, but I think that we will be successful in this space. I think the smart marketers are already moving in this idea that you have to pull consumers in and not push messaging to them. And I think that we will be in a better space in 5 years.
Great answer.
Yeah, I think tagging along to that, I'm going to steal that a bit, but I think looking back 5 years from now, just being part of that movement of brands that are creating an authentic conversation with their audiences, not just feeding the beast, not just pushing out an ad for that first sale, but creating that conversation and creating that authentic connection with them, not just for that sale, but what happens after that sale. We as communicators and marketers need to start thinking about what happens post-sale. How do you continue to engage with your customer and have them love your brand or love your company? And I think that's the movement that's happening right now, and I kind of look forward to that over the next 5 years.
All right, so now a personal question to both you guys. Outside of work, are you more on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram? What are you more of?
Definitely Instagram. It's where I can pretend to be a real photographer. I love it. And then
So you're more of a creator of content on Instagram as opposed to a voyeur on Instagram?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then on Twitter, I definitely lurk. So you'll see me tweeting maybe once a week or once every other week, but I'm on there every day to get my news and to figure out what's happening.
Yeah, I would say Instagram, but Facebook is kind of like the place for politics and lots of fighting. So
Okay.
I'm going to try and sunset Facebook soon, though,
Yeah, not gonna.
personally.
And you?
For consumption, YouTube. I'm a massive YouTube content person. I'm a consumer of how-to or just how things work. I don't know what it is, but I'm just a geek on that stuff. But
UII, you like that? Huh?
but not just how stuff works in general. I appear most on Instagram, though through my wife's Instagram channel. Believe it or not,
Is it because you've been kicked off Instagram?
I'm relatively camera shy in general, so she only catches me every now and then when I'm not paying attention. But I appear, she likes to blog on design and fashion. She's the super creative, whereas I'm more analytical.
And one other that we didn't get to mention is Quora. I don't know who's familiar with that here.
Yeah.
That's a great place to,
it.
just kind of learn about new things. But if you're a brand, there's people asking questions
Answer
about something that's
questions.
relevant
Yeah.
for you. Get on Quora, start answering questions there. That's a really interesting place for you that wouldn't really require too much of an investment. Sorry, I had to plug
No,
that
I
in
actually
there.
said-
I have no investment in Quora or
No.
no relation to them. I think it's a great channel to connect with people.
And not to, I'm more of an Instagram. I think
Yeah.
a picture tells 1,000 stories. I learn more. I mean, actually, Twitter is where I see like the quick news. I think it's more of an. I think Twitter's really just becoming a news feed.
Yeah.
That's really all it should be.
Yeah.
But Instagram is. I'd rather spend 10 minutes on Instagram than any other social media.
It's happier.
And and you learn a story, and you get to sort of curate it the way you want it to be curated. And it's also, as a father of two, it's the only way I get to voyeur on my kids. Also too, because if you're friends with their friends, you know what they're doing at night too. So it's actually pretty cool. But thank you guys. This was actually really fascinating. And
fun.
Paulo, thank you for being a last minute.
Thanks, Paul.
Literally last minute. Pleasure. It was
Thank you
fantastic.
guys.
Yeah.